You're already a creature of habit. You wake up, probably in the same way, at the same time. You brush your teeth, you drink your coffee, maybe you check your phone before you even realize what you're doing. You don't think about it, you don't plan it. It just happens. And that is the key to changing everything, because those small automatic rituals, they're powerful. And when you learn to stack new habits onto them, ones that matter, that push you forward, you stop relying on willpower. You start building momentum. That's what habit stacking is. And once you get the hang of it, it feels like cheating, like progress just happens. No battle, no resistance, just flow. Imagine this. You want to start journaling every day, but the idea of carving out time, finding the right pen, opening a blank page and sitting in silence with your thoughts sounds daunting. So instead, you take something you're already doing, say making coffee, and you tack journaling right onto it. While the coffee's brewing, you sit down, open your notebook, and write one sentence. That's it, just one. But by piggybacking the new habit onto something automatic, it starts to feel automatic too. No decision fatigue, no struggle, just one small, consistent win. Over time, that one sentence becomes 3, then a paragraph, then a full reflection. But it started with the stack, not with motivation, and the reason it works is neuroscience. Every habit follows a loop. Cue, routine, reward. The cue is your trigger, the thing that reminds your brain it's time to act. In the case of brushing your teeth, the cue is usually waking up or going to bed. The routine is the brushing. The reward might be a minty clean mouth or just the satisfaction of not skipping. But here's where the magic happens. If you insert a new behavior after the cue but before the reward, your brain starts linking the whole sequence together. So if you floss right after brushing, eventually your brain ties both together. They become one loop. That's habit stacking. It's about using the momentum of one habit to carry another. And if done right, it snowballs. But let's zoom out. Why does this matter? Because motivation is unreliable. Energy fluctuates. Willpower drains. You can't always count on inspiration to push you forward. But systems? Systems you can count on. Habit stacking is a system, a blueprint for making change stick. It doesn't require you to overhaul your life. It doesn't ask you to become a different person overnight. It just asks you to notice what you already do and build on it. And here's something most people get wrong. They try to start habits in isolation, like deciding to meditate at 6 a.m., but not linking it to anything they already do. So when the alarm goes off, they snooze it, or they get distracted, and the habit never takes root. But if you say, after I brush my teeth, I'll sit on the floor and breathe for 1 minute, that's specific, that's anchored. And your brain says, oh, this goes here now. That anchoring is what creates flow. No friction, just sequence. Let's walk through more real-life examples. Say you want to drink more water. Instead of just reminding yourself all day, you stack it. After every bathroom trip, you drink a glass of water. Bathroom becomes the cue. Hydration becomes the reward. Or maybe you want to practice gratitude. After you put your phone on the charger at night, you say out loud one thing you're thankful for. That's the stack. Small, specific, easy, but powerful. And here's where this gets really interesting. Stacking habits isn't just about what you do, it's also about how you see yourself. Every time you follow through on a stack, you're reinforcing an identity. You're saying, I'm the kind of person who reflects, who hydrates, who prioritizes sleep, who moves, who grows. It's not about achieving a goal, it's about becoming someone, one stack at a time. The mistake is thinking that habits are about discipline. They're not. They're about design. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. If your environment, your timing, and your sequencing support your behavior, you win. If they don't, you struggle. Simple as that. So how do you start? First, audit your day. What are your existing anchors? Things you already do without thinking. Waking up, making coffee, brushing teeth, using the bathroom, checking email, eating lunch, watching TV. These are your cue points. Don't judge them, just list them. Then, write down a few tiny habits you want to build. Not goals, not outcomes, just actions, like stretching, reading one sentence, writing a to-do list, taking a breath, smiling, anything. Now pair one with the other. After I brush my teeth, I'll do 10 push-ups. After I pour my coffee, I'll read one sentence from a book. After I plug in my phone at night, I'll write one line in my journal. That's it. And yes, it has to be tiny. Why? Because your brain resists big. If the habit feels too heavy, it stalls. But if it feels stupidly small, like, of course I can do that, you do it. And that builds momentum. You show up, you collect wins. And over time, those micro wins become macro change. That's how you rewire your brain. Not with massive effort, but with consistent repetition. You may be wondering, what if I forget? What if I don't feel like it? What if life throws a wrench in the plan? You will. It will. That's expected. But the beauty of habit stacking is that it's flexible. You don't need perfection, you just need a reset. When the stack breaks, you don't start over, you return. You relink the habit to its cue. You remind yourself this goes here. And you do the tiny version. One push-up, one breath, one sentence. That counts. Because the goal isn't intensity, it's consistency. You're building an identity, not chasing a streak. And eventually it becomes unconscious. You don't think about stretching. You just do it after brushing. You don't debate whether to reflect. You just do it when you plug in your phone. And your life, slowly, quietly, transforms. Not because of one breakthrough, but because you chose to stack what matters. Now let's zoom into a deeper idea. Habit stacking can evolve. Once one stack becomes automatic, you can stack again. You can create chains. For example, after you pour your coffee, you write in your journal. After your journal, you open a book. After you read, you write your to-do list. One leads to the next, a cascade of positive behaviors, each triggered by the last. That's not just habit stacking, that's habit architecture. You're designing your day, and design beats discipline every time. What's powerful is how invisible this becomes. To outsiders, it looks like you have iron willpower. But inside, you're just running a sequence, a playlist. Press play, and the music starts. That's what it feels like when stacking is working. And when it's not, you troubleshoot the system. You don't blame yourself, you adjust the stack. Now imagine this in every part of your life. Physical health, emotional resilience, learning, relationships, creativity, productivity. You want to become someone who moves every day? Stack stretching onto your morning bathroom break. You want to stay calm under pressure? Stack a deep breath onto your calendar review. You want to deepen your relationships? Stack one compliment after every conversation. It's not magic, it's architecture. And once you know how to build it, the possibilities are endless. You start to notice patterns, how your energy shifts after one small win, how the day feels different when you begin it with intention, how confidence grows, not from grand achievements, but from keeping small promises to yourself. This is the hidden power of habit stacking. It doesn't just change your behavior, it rewires your self-concept. You begin to see yourself as capable, consistent, focused. Even on the days when things don't go perfectly, you still have these anchor points, rituals that ground you, that remind you who you are and where you're going. And the best part? It scales. Let's say you're working on fitness. After you tie your shoes, you walk for 5 minutes. That's your stack. But once that feels effortless, you extend it. 5 minutes becomes 10, then 20, then a jog. But you never forced it. You never battled yourself. You let the habit grow naturally, in alignment with your life. This is what makes it sustainable. You're not overwhelming your nervous system with massive changes. You're offering it something predictable, something safe, something rewarding. And reward matters. Every habit needs a payoff, not just the long-term benefit, but the immediate satisfaction. That's what keeps your brain invested. So when you design your stacks, make sure they feel good. Add something you enjoy, a breath of fresh air, a stretch that releases tension, a sip of something warm, even a mental pat on the back. Celebrate the action, not the outcome. That's what wires it in. Let's explore another layer, identity stacking. This is when your new habit directly supports the type of person you want to become. So instead of saying, I want to read more, you say, I'm a reader. Then you stack reading onto a daily cue. After lunch, I read 1 page. Or after I get in bed, I open a book. The action reinforces the identity, and the identity makes the action more likely. It's a feedback loop. The more you act like the person you want to become, the more you believe it. And the more you believe it, the more you act that way. That's how transformation becomes inevitable. Not because you force it, but because you design it. And you don't have to do it alone. Habit stacking can be social. You can build shared stacks with a friend or partner. Like after we brush our teeth, we each say one thing we're grateful for. Or after dinner, we clean the kitchen together while playing a podcast. When habits become shared rituals, they strengthen relationships. You're not just building routines, you're building culture. A microculture of growth, connection, and intention. And here's something counterintuitive. Failure actually helps. Every time a stack breaks, it reveals friction. Maybe the cue wasn't consistent. Maybe the habit was too big. Maybe the reward wasn't clear. Great, that's feedback, not failure. You adjust, you shrink the action, you pick a new cue, you reframe the reward. The goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to become adaptive, to refine your system until it works for you. Not for Instagram, not for a book, for your life, your rhythms, your priorities. And remember, habit stacking is not about adding complexity. It's about reducing friction. If your stack feels like a burden, you went too big. Make it lighter, simpler, shorter. It's better to do something tiny every day than something massive once a month. Momentum loves consistency, even if it's just 30 seconds. One breath, one rep, one line. That's enough, because what you're really training is not the behavior. You're training the muscle of follow-through, the habit of showing up. And over time, this spills into everything. You start stacking good choices without even realizing it. After you hydrate, you crave movement. After movement, you want better food. After eating well, you sleep better. After sleeping well, you focus more. It becomes a loop, a spiral of upgrades. That's the secret of compound habits. They multiply. One good behavior creates the conditions for the next. And that's when life starts to feel alive. Like things just work. Like you're not forcing progress, you're flowing with it. So what happens when life changes? When routines break? When you travel or get sick, or your schedule shifts. This is where the real strength of habit stacking reveals itself. Because once a stack is ingrained, it becomes portable. It's not tied to a location, it's tied to a sequence. If your cue is brushing your teeth, it doesn't matter if you're at home or in a hotel. If your cue is turning off your computer, it works in any office. The sequence is the system. That's what makes it resilient. That's what makes it last. And when things fall apart, as they sometimes will, you come back to your stack. You don't need to rebuild your entire life. You just rebuild the loop. One cue, one action, one reward. That's how you restart. That's how you recover. That's how you remind your nervous system, we know what to do. We've been here before. We return. It becomes your safety net, your foundation, your home base. Not a rigid schedule, but a living rhythm. One that evolves with you. One that supports you through change, through stress, through uncertainty. Because you're not relying on discipline anymore. You're relying on design. And when people ask how you stay so consistent, how you stay calm, how you keep growing, you'll smile. Because the answer isn't glamorous. It's not a 5 a.m. miracle routine or a hyper-optimized biohack. It's just a few simple stacks, a few loops that carry you forward. Quietly, consistently, powerfully. Let's talk about advanced stacking. Once you've built a few strong sequences, you can start combining categories. For example, physical plus mental plus emotional. Like after I get out of bed, I stretch for 1 minute, then I write one intention, then I say one kind thing to myself. That's a trifecta stack. Body, mind, spirit, all activated in one seamless flow. You start the day tuned in, aligned, ready. Or maybe you want to build an evening wind down. After you turn off the TV, you drink a calming tea, write down tomorrow's top task, then put your phone in another room. That's a power down sequence. It tells your brain the day is ending, time to rest. Over time, that stack becomes your off switch. You don't just go to bed, you arrive at sleep. Calm, clear, unburdened. You can also stack by location. For example, every time you sit at your desk, you take a deep breath and ask, what's my one focus right now? That becomes your mental reset. Or every time you walk through your front door, you drop your phone in a drawer. That becomes your transition from work to home. The environment triggers the stack, and the stack shifts your state. That's the real power here. Habit stacking doesn't just change behavior, it changes state. From scattered to focused, from stressed to calm, from reactive to intentional. One cue, one action, one shift. That's all it takes. You stop thinking about the stack. You just are the stack. You embody the ritual. You become the identity. And it's not effort anymore, it's who you are. You wake up and you move through the world differently. You carry this quiet confidence that others notice. They may not understand where it comes from, but you do. It's the result of hundreds of small decisions, stacked behaviors, invisible wins. Not heroic acts of willpower, but tiny rituals repeated until they rewired your brain, until they became part of your operating system. That's the thing about habit stacking. It builds inner momentum that others can't see. But they feel it. And more importantly, you feel it. The mornings get easier. Your focus sharpens. You feel less scattered, more grounded. Because you're not starting from scratch every day. You're starting from systems, anchors, patterns that pull you forward instead of holding you back. And that changes everything. Your productivity, your mood, your health, your relationships. Not because you're doing more, but because you're doing what matters automatically. And once you see it working, you start to trust yourself more. You stop setting unrealistic goals because you know you can build sustainable systems instead. You stop beating yourself up for breaking streaks because you know how to repair loops. You stop looking for hacks and start designing habits that align with your real life. You stop chasing outcomes and start becoming the person who creates them. Let's take a moment and visualize. Picture your ideal day. Not some fantasy where everything is perfect, but a real, sustainable, satisfying day. What does it look like? When do you wake up? What's the first thing you do? How do you transition from task to task? What anchors your morning, your afternoon, your evening? What are the micro moments that define the rhythm of your life? Now imagine that each of those moments is a cue, a switch, a trigger for something that feeds your values, that energizes you, that grounds you, that connects you. It might be small, a breath, a stretch, a pause, a kind word, but it's intentional, and it stacks. You're not reacting to the day, you're composing it, like music, with tempo, with texture, with flow. This is the essence of intentional living, not rigid control, not obsessive optimization, but thoughtful rhythm. Small sequences that align your inner world with your outer actions. And the beauty of it is it works even when life is messy, because the system is resilient. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep stacking. And over time, the results compound. Your energy rises, your focus deepens, your sense of peace expands, and you realize the change didn't come from some breakthrough or breakthrough moment. It came from brushing your teeth, pouring coffee, putting on shoes, tying a new habit to an old one, over and over again, until it clicked, until it stuck, until it became you. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Resistance, because it will come. Even with stacking, you'll have days when you don't want to, when you forget, when you're tired, when life feels too heavy. And in those moments, here's what you do. Shrink the stack. Make it so small it's ridiculous. If your habit is 10 push-ups, do 1. If your habit is a journal entry, write a single word. If your habit is a walk, take 5 steps. That's not failure, that's minimum viable action. It keeps the loop alive. It keeps your identity intact. You're still the person who shows up, even on the hard days. And that consistency builds trust. You start to believe yourself when you make commitments. You start to feel proud of your process. You stop swinging between extremes, all in or all out. And you settle into a steady rhythm. Like a heartbeat, reliable, quiet, unstoppable. Here's another tip. Pair your habit stacks with sensory cues. Sights, sounds, smells. If you want to meditate after brushing your teeth, light the same candle each time. Or play the same song. If you want to journal after your morning coffee, use the same pen. Sit in the same chair. Wear the same cozy hoodie. These details matter. They reinforce the loop. They turn behavior into ritual. And ritual is powerful because it carries emotion. It makes the action feel sacred, not just another task, but a moment of meaning. And you can use language too. Verbal anchors. Phrases you repeat to yourself as you enter the stack, like "this is my time," or "I show up for myself," or "one small step." These mantras link intention to action. They remind your brain why this matters. They give the habit emotional weight. And emotion is what makes habits stick. You can also use movement. Link physical gestures to mental states. If you want to feel confident, stand tall. If you want to feel focused, take a grounding breath. If you want to feel calm, soften your shoulders. Over time, these gestures become part of the stack. They're not just responses, they're triggers. Signals that tell your brain it's time to shift, to show up, to rise. And what about the days you feel like you're going backward? When you break a streak? When your old habits creep back in? This is where compassion becomes your greatest tool. Because shame kills momentum, but curiosity restores it. Instead of judging yourself, ask, what broke the loop? What cue did I miss? What emotion got in the way? What support do I need? This turns failure into feedback. It keeps you in the game. It keeps you growing. You can even build a recovery stack, a ritual you use to reset. Like when I feel off track, I pause, breathe, and do one small thing. That's a stack, a loop, a ladder back to yourself. And eventually you realize habit stacking isn't just a method, it's a philosophy, a way of moving through life with grace, with rhythm, with intention. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what matters, with ease, with flow, with trust. And you start to see how everything is connected, how brushing your teeth can lead to strength, how pouring coffee can lead to reflection, how turning off your phone can lead to rest, how tiny actions, stacked wisely, build the life you want. That's the gift of this approach. It meets you where you are. It asks for very little, but it gives back so much. Energy, focus, confidence, peace, momentum. And now it's your turn. Take one thing you already do every day, one anchor, one cue, and choose one new behavior to stack onto it. Make it tiny, make it specific. Do it today, not tomorrow, not next Monday. Today, because that's how change begins. Not with a revolution, but with a ripple. One action, one cue, one win. And once you start stacking those wins, they never stop. You start noticing opportunities everywhere. You finish brushing your teeth and realize this could be the cue to hydrate. You close your laptop and think this could trigger a 1-minute walk. You sit down for lunch and decide this is the perfect moment to reflect on something you're grateful for. Life starts offering you natural on-ramps to better behavior. You don't have to schedule everything. You just embed action into existing rhythms. And the more you look, the more places you find to insert growth into the cracks of your day. You also begin to refine your stacks. You experiment. You ask, is this cue consistent enough? Does this behavior feel right at this time of day? Does this reward actually register as satisfying? And you adjust, not because you're failing, but because you're designing. You're an architect of your time. You're the one in charge of what fits where. That flexibility is what makes it sustainable. You're not stuck in someone else's routine. You're creating your own. And this spills into your self-talk. You stop saying things like, I'm just not a morning person, or I can never stick with habits. You replace them with curiosity, with clarity, with control. You say, I haven't found the right cue yet. Or, this habit needs to be smaller. Or that stack worked well until my routine changed, time to pivot. You stop labeling yourself and start leading yourself. That shift in language becomes a shift in identity. You'll start to recognize a feeling when the stack clicks, a sense of lightness, flow. You don't dread it. You might even look forward to it. That's when you know it's working. Not because you forced it, but because it fits. And if it doesn't feel right anymore, you change it. Because growth is not about rigidity, it's about alignment. It's about paying attention to what fuels you and doing more of that. Over time, you become the kind of person who trusts process over mood, who shows up even when they're tired, who doesn't wait for the perfect moment, who knows how to shrink a habit when life gets hard, who doesn't lose progress when things go sideways, because the system is built on stacking, and stacking is resilient. You'll also begin to see patterns in others, how they unintentionally stack behaviors, how one action leads to another, how negative stacks form just as easily. Like scrolling after meals, or snacking after TV, or checking email after every notification. And this awareness gives you power, because now you can interrupt the chain. You can swap the behavior while keeping the cue. After dinner becomes a walk instead of a screen. After a meeting becomes a stretch instead of a complaint. You take control of the link, you decide what comes next, and the more intentional you become with your stacks, the more creative you get. You try out stacking affirmations after mirror time. You test a one-song dance break after finishing a tough task. You insert 5 deep breaths after locking your car. Suddenly, your day is filled with these micro acts of self-leadership, moments that feel small, but shift everything. You can also use stacking to create transitions, those invisible in-between zones where you shift from one role to another, from worker to parent, from parent to partner, from thinker to sleeper. Build stacks that honor those shifts. Like, after I close my laptop, I put on music that signals the workday is over. Or after I tuck the kids in, I change into comfy clothes and make tea. These rituals signal to your nervous system that it's safe to switch gears, that you're allowed to shift states, that you don't have to carry one mode into the next. And this is crucial, because so much of our stress comes from lack of transitions, from dragging the energy of one task into the next without pause. Habit stacking gives you those pauses, those bridges. It creates flow, it creates space, it creates intention. You'll also begin to track your stacks, not for perfection, but for patterns. You'll notice I'm solid in the morning, but evenings get fuzzy. Or this stack works great during the week, but not on weekends. That's data, not failure. You adjust. You build weekend versions. You build travel versions. You evolve the habit as your life evolves, and it stays with you because you let it breathe. And here's a beautiful surprise. The more you stack wins, the more generous you become with your time, your focus, your energy, because you're not leaking it all day. You're not reacting, you're acting. And that creates surplus. That surplus becomes presence. That presence becomes power. You become someone who doesn't rush, who doesn't forget the little things, who remembers to breathe, to smile, to pause. Not because you're trying so hard to be mindful, but because you've designed your life to support it. And the ripple effect is real. Your kids notice, your co-workers feel it, your friends wonder how you stay so steady. And it's not that you're special, it's that you made choices. One cue, one action, one win at a time. You might even notice old identities shedding. Maybe you thought of yourself as lazy, disorganized, chaotic. But now the evidence says otherwise. You journaled 10 days in a row. You walked 3 times this week. You remembered to hydrate after every meal. That's not lazy, that's growth. That's consistency, that's character showing itself in behavior. And the pride you feel, it's earned. Not flashy, not performative, just quiet, steady progress, the kind that no one can take away. Because it wasn't luck, it wasn't a trick, it was you, designing, stacking, becoming. You'll also learn to anticipate friction. You know that some days will feel heavy, so you plan for it. You build in lighter stacks, you have backups. You say, if I can't journal for 5 minutes, I'll write 1 word. If I can't stretch for 10 minutes, I'll breathe for 10 seconds. These aren't compromises, they're commitments to stay in motion, to stay connected, to keep your identity alive even when energy dips. And then one day you realize something incredible. You didn't just change a few habits. You changed how you change. You didn't just get better at doing, you got better at becoming. You didn't just organize your time, you organized your life, not with force, but with flow, not with pressure, but with design, not with guilt, but with grace. And you keep going, because stacking wins never stops. You begin to realize that the real transformation isn't in the big goals you once thought mattered most, the giant resolutions, the radical overnight changes, the sweeping declarations. The real transformation is here, in the mundane, in the repeated, in the stacking. You look back and barely recognize the version of you who used to struggle just to get started. Because now, you're always starting. Not waiting for the right mood, not searching for perfect timing, just beginning. 1 cue, 1 breath, 1 act. You notice how this mindset seeps into things you never associated with habit. The way you interact with others, the way you treat your own thoughts. You find yourself stacking kindness after moments of frustration, stacking reflection after difficult conversations. You start to use emotional cues as triggers too, not just physical ones. When you feel overwhelmed, instead of spiraling, you pause. That pause becomes your cue. You breathe, you ground yourself, and in that moment you take back your power. Again and again. You start to play with the idea of invisible habits, not the ones you see or track, but the ones you feel. After every stressful meeting, you walk outside. After every phone call, you stretch your hands. After every time you notice tension, you soften your jaw. These aren't loud changes. No one else may notice, but you do. And your nervous system does. And over time, that creates a baseline of calm, a foundation of inner strength that can't be shaken by external chaos. You'll also see how habits don't live in isolation. They influence each other. When you stack a healthy choice early in the day, it nudges the next one. You stretch in the morning, and suddenly you crave better food. You drink water consistently, and your energy lifts. You pause to reflect, and your conversations feel richer. You journal before bed, and your sleep deepens. Each win feeds the next. Not because you forced it, but because you set up the first domino. And as this happens, your self-image shifts. You no longer wonder if you're capable of change. You've proved it. You don't fantasize about discipline. You practice design. You don't over-identify with the old stories of inconsistency. You write new ones, with action, with follow-through, with gentle, daily proof. You also stop needing to defend your time, because your systems show what you value. You don't need to say, I'm trying to prioritize my health. You just do it. It's baked into your day, into your stacks, into your routines. You don't have to negotiate with yourself every time you want to grow, because the growth is built into your flow. You find that your energy is no longer scattered, it's focused, streamlined. You spend less time deciding what to do and more time doing it. You no longer open your day like a browser with 50 tabs. You open it like a clean slate with clear direction. Not because you became someone rigid or robotic, but because you gave yourself structure. Just enough to support you, just enough to elevate you. And when someone asks how you did it, you won't need a fancy answer. You'll just say, I stacked one small win onto something I already did, then I did it again. That's it. That's the engine. That's the revolution in disguise. You may even find that habit stacking becomes a form of self-respect. A way of saying to yourself, I matter enough to design my life with care. A way of showing up for yourself again and again, not out of obligation, but out of devotion. Not to perfection, but to presence. You stop seeing success as some far-off mountain to climb. You see it as a path beneath your feet, made one brick at a time, one sequence, one loop, one decision that links to the next. And you get creative. You explore seasonal stacks. In summer, maybe your post-lunch habit includes a walk in the sun. In winter, maybe it's a cup of tea and a few minutes by the window. You let your environment influence your design. You let your body speak. You listen. You adapt. And when you fall out of rhythm, because you will, you no longer spiral into guilt. You simply rebuild. Not from zero, but from memory, from structure. From the strong spine of routines you've lived into so many times before. You say, this is the part where I come back. And you do. Not with force, but with ease, with confidence, because you've practiced the return. And through all of this, you become less reactive to life. You stop getting pulled by every interruption, every craving, every mood swing. You respond with more clarity. You pause before reacting. You act with more intention. Not because you became superhuman, but because you practiced tiny habits that brought you back to center. Over and over again. This is what makes you powerful. Not loud victories, but quiet repetition. Not explosive growth, but sustained momentum. And eventually you notice something profound. Your habits no longer feel like effort. They feel like you. As natural as breathing, as seamless as blinking. You're not trying to be a better version of yourself anymore. You are that version. Not because you forced it, but because you stacked your way into it. One cue, one breath, one win at a time. And you keep going. Because stacking wins never stops. You begin to notice that the world doesn't pull you off course as easily anymore. Not because the noise has gone away, but because you've turned down its volume by turning up your own clarity. You've built internal pathways that are stronger than external distractions. When the day throws surprises at you, and it will, you have anchors. You have default settings. You have practiced patterns that bring you back. Instead of reacting to chaos, you move through it. Rooted, present, directed. And this doesn't mean you're robotic. It means you've freed your mind to focus on the things that matter most. Because every good habit you've stacked removes one more decision from your day. One more place where energy doesn't have to leak. One more chance to conserve focus for what really matters. Creation, connection, growth. That's the hidden genius of habit stacking. It doesn't just give you time, it gives you mind share. It gives you the bandwidth to be present, to make better choices, to hear yourself think. And when you get that space back, even in tiny pockets, everything changes. The day slows down, you see more, feel more, choose more intentionally, and eventually you stop chasing balance like it's a finish line. You realize that balance isn't something you find, it's something you build. One small choice layered onto another, one mindful sequence guiding the next. You're not aiming for some grand equilibrium. You're creating micro-balances throughout your day. And those micro-balances stabilize you more than any sweeping overhaul ever could. As you continue stacking, you'll realize how much power lives in starting. Not in finishing everything, not in doing it perfectly, just in starting. When you attach a new habit to a solid cue, it removes the friction of beginning. That's why the tiniest version of your habit matters so much. Because starting is the seed, and once it sprouts, it often keeps growing. A 1-minute walk becomes 10. A single push-up turns into a full set. One line in a journal opens the door to a page of clarity. But even when it doesn't grow, even when it stays small, it still works. Because the identity is forming, the loop is alive, and the trust in yourself deepens. This is what people get wrong when they chase motivation. They look for fuel when they should be building rails. Tracks, systems, motivation fades. But tracks carry you forward no matter how you feel. Habit stacking is those tracks. And when you're really tuned in, you start to stack not just behaviors but intentions. You say, after I open my laptop, I'll pause and ask what matters most right now. Or, after I walk into the room, I'll choose to bring warmth and presence. These aren't just actions, they're identity statements in motion. And the more you repeat them, the more naturally they arise. Soon, your life isn't just full of good habits, it's full of meaningful moments. Because you've designed it to be. Because you've stopped leaving your growth up to chance. Because you've chosen every day to make space for who you want to become. And here's where it gets even more powerful. You're not just stacking habits for yourself anymore. You're modeling it for others. You're showing your kids what consistency looks like. You're inspiring your team with calm, steady focus. You're creating ripples that reach beyond your own day, without preaching, without pushing, just by practicing, just by becoming. And the beauty is you never run out of new stacks to build. As your goals evolve, your stacks evolve. As your environment shifts, your rituals adapt. You're never starting from scratch, just adding another brick to the foundation, another win to the chain, another cue that leads to another version of your best self. You might start to see your day as a canvas. Each habit stack a brushstroke, each tiny win a layer of color. You're painting something meaningful, not in a rush, but in rhythm. Not with force, but with grace. And when life gets messy, when the unexpected happens, when you fall out of rhythm, your stacks are still there, waiting, like handholds on a climb, like familiar steps in a storm. You don't have to rebuild your life. Just reconnect to one anchor, one cue, one small action that says, I'm still here, I'm still becoming. Because that's what habit stacking gives you. Not just progress, but resilience. Not just change, but identity. Not just goals, but a way of living that honors who you are and who you're becoming. And you keep going. Because stacking wins never stops. You begin to recognize that the version of yourself you once hoped to become isn't somewhere in the distant future anymore. They're here, right now, built slowly, layered with care, formed by all the tiny, invisible decisions that once felt insignificant, now stitched together into a structure of identity that supports you, elevates you, and feels so natural you hardly notice the effort anymore. The goals you once labeled as someday begin to feel like, of course. You look at your environment differently too. Everything becomes part of the system. The placement of a book on the nightstand, the water bottle next to your keys, the shoes by the door, the phone charger across the room. These aren't random objects anymore. They're signals, reminders, supports. The world becomes your collaborator in change because you've turned it into one. You've stopped relying solely on willpower and started building a life that nudges you gently in the right direction. And now your habits don't just shape your day, they shape your energy. You start noticing which actions drain you and which actions fuel you. You double down on the ones that give. You trim the ones that take. You listen to your system. You respect your own rhythms. You become a steward of your own energy, not just a user of time. That's a shift that changes everything. It's also the point where your system starts feeling like a gift instead of a rule book. You're not just trying to be productive, you're trying to be aligned. You're not just checking boxes, you're checking in with yourself, with your purpose, with your values. Each stack becomes a conversation. Is this still working? Is this still me? Is this still serving where I'm going? And if the answer is no, you pivot. No shame, just awareness, just growth. The more you practice, the more you realize how flexible this method is. You can stack inward habits like reflection, breathwork, self-talk, just as easily as outward ones like exercise or hydration. You can stack creative habits. After opening your laptop, you sketch for 5 minutes. After reading a page, you write a sentence. You can stack social habits. After texting a friend, you send a compliment. After family dinner, you share a high and a low. There's no category this doesn't touch. No area of life it can't influence. You even start to notice how habit stacking works with emotions. After feeling stressed, you step outside. After a moment of anger, you exhale and pause. After anxiety, you write one line about what you're feeling. You begin to use the feeling as a cue. And that's the next level. Emotional intelligence baked into behavior. You're not just reacting to your emotions. You're responding with care, with design, with a strategy that honors your humanity. And it doesn't take away the struggle, but it does give it structure. It gives it direction. You don't get stuck in the loop. You break it gently with an action that's been rehearsed. One you chose when you were calm and clear-headed. One you prepared for. That's real power. Not the power to avoid emotion, but the power to guide it. You realize how far you've come when you hit a hard day, and instead of spiraling, you lean on your stack. You do your minimum viable action, you breathe, you hydrate, you stretch, you pause before responding, and you think this would have derailed me before. But now, you're here, centered, capable, adaptive. And even on the days you don't follow the stack, even when you skip or forget, you don't crumble, because your identity isn't fragile anymore. It's not tied to perfection, it's tied to practice. And practice allows space for the occasional miss. Because it knows you'll return. And you do return. Because returning is the habit now. The comeback is built into the system. You don't have to start over, you just step back in, like picking up a melody, like rejoining a rhythm. This changes your confidence. It's no longer based on results, it's based on your relationship with follow-through. You trust that even when you fall, you know how to stand again. That even when life throws you off, your stacks are waiting. Like a quiet friend, like a compass. It's around this time that you start to simplify. Early on, stacking is exciting, and it's easy to overbuild. But now you start to prune, to streamline, to choose the few high-impact cues that matter most. You realize that 5 core stacks, practiced consistently, will outperform 20 scattered ones. So you refine, you simplify, you sharpen the system until it hums. And now your life feels less like a collection of habits and more like an ecosystem. Everything supports everything else. Your morning stacks feed your day sets up your evening supports your sleep resets your energy. It's not perfect, but it's intentional. It's not rigid, but it's stable. It's not overwhelming, but it's deeply powerful. And through all of it, you remain curious. You keep exploring. Not chasing novelty, but exploring possibility. What if I added 5 seconds of gratitude here? What if I started my meetings with 1 moment of silence? What if I ended my day with a loving message to myself? These aren't hacks, they're expressions of who you're becoming, of what you value, of the life you're creating, and you keep going. Because stacking wins never stops.